Danielle went to church on Sunday.
I went to church. I'll sing it. Welcome. No, leave that in there. Welcome to another episode of the Big Money Stylist podcast. Every week we try to come up with a topic. We don't plan this out. We're literally like, what do people need to hear? What do we want to talk about? We plan trainings out. Don't get me wrong. But when it comes to the podcast, like, sometimes we have ideas that we want to talk about that are happening inside of our academy, and sometimes we're just like, okay, what do we want to talk about? Mm-hmm. So I told Ani, she makes fun of me because every week I'm like, ooh, in church, but it's not even. I told you every time I go to church, somehow my brain like flips it, and I'm like, that's very relevant to business, okay? But I was like, the one thing that I want to talk about today is I was like, there's no guarantees in life. Yeah, like there's not. So like you're in business and you know you need to make some huge moves. Or like whatever it is, hire an assistant, fire an assistant, buy a salon, like whatever. It could be a small decision. It could be a major decision. And yet a lot of us know like internally, like you need to take this jump. You need to take this leap of faith. And it's like we want a guarantee on the other side, but it wouldn't be called a leap of faith if you had a guarantee.
Well, and here's the thing, because I think whenever it comes to making any big decision, whether it's starting a new service that you're scared of, starting a brand new business, moving somewhere, like Danielle said, buying a house, any kind of decision that could have any effect on your life at all, especially a negative impact, we tend to look at it as, but what if this bad thing happens?
We see like the other side of failure and we're like, that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, and we assume we're like, oh my gosh, if I do this bad thing could happen.
This could happen.
But I think we don't even take the time to really say, okay, but if I did this, this great thing could also come from it.
And so many doors that you can't even see will open on the other side of taking that leap. And so it's like so many times we're like, oh no, we look at like the negative side of things and we're like, oh, it's too risky, I can't do that. But then that voice keeps coming back like, you need to do this. So like even you, Ani, like when you first came to move here, you came and did an MBR class. You changed your entire book of business. You went from making like hardly anything to quintupling your revenue in less than a year. You bought your first home, like you were engaged, like then you come here and you do what we still do in classes, which is called a vision quest. Yeah. Like and literally you flipped your entire world and moved here. And like you in your mind, you had hit the checklist. You were like, did that, nailed that, engaged, like ready to go. Like everything logically made sense. And you just said,
I truly, like, I had the life that I feel like other people, I'm not to be like people was trying for it, but seriously, I was working 3 days a week. I was making $20,000 a month. I had my own house. I was engaged. Like
you were like 27?
I was 27.
Yeah, you were young.
That year that I like did that to my business, I took 63 days of vacation. And that doesn't include weekends. Like I left and did something fun for vacation. So like, yeah, my life was fucking great. And then all of a sudden, you know, Garrett and Danielle call me and offer me this position here in California, and people thought I was nuts.
But even before that, you had told me you're like, I saw myself here. I saw myself.
Oh yeah, that was way back in 2016.
But did you like physically, like in your mind, you're like, I know I'm supposed to be here.
Oh yeah, and there's never been a scarier thought because this was back in 2016 when I took my first BMS class, and we did a vision quest where you sit there and you say like, who do you want to be a year from now? And for me, I was like, I'm working with these people. I'm here. Like I'm in, not just like an artist doing NBR, but I'm part of the education. And I feel like the really scary part was that it seemed so impossible because I was just that girl from Missouri. Like I was just an artist. I didn't have the fancy clothes or the super cool style. I didn't have like a niche that like the thing that made me the person that other people wanted to follow. I never felt like that person. So then to be sitting there on the beach and being like, I want to be here. The biggest vision I have ever had for myself in my entire life. It truly felt so far out of my realm that I'm like, this is impossible. But I was like, okay, but I want it to be true more than anything in the world. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be. It has to come true.
So how did you like knowing and everything that you had built? Was it because you felt you needed to be there and you were willing to take the risk?
It would have been the biggest regret of my life.
Right.
I knew if I did not follow this fire that was in my soul telling me like, you have to be here. Like you have to do it.
Always wonder.
I would regret it every fucking day for the rest of my life. And every day I would wonder, what if? Like, what if I just hadn't been so scared? What if I had just gotten out of my own head? What if I had just tried a little bit harder? Like, what if? And one of the really big reasons why I was able to change my business, as I've said this before, but so many of my clients were older at the time, and they would sit in my chair and be like, what are you doing? And I'd be like, I'm doing this and doing that. And they'd be like, oh, I wish I'd done that. Man, I wish I'd done that. Man, I wish. And every time I heard it, it was like,
like, oh.
like it like tightened my chest. And I realized like, I didn't want to be the person at 50, 60, 70 looking back at someone who was 26, 27 going, sure wish I had tried when I was your age.
Well, and that's what's so crazy is like every big move you make, like it's scary. And a lot of times you feel like you're doing it alone, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, nobody understands me. I'm doing this alone. Nobody gets me. But it's through like taking that leap and through like getting there that you are strengthened yourself. You're like, oh my God. And you get to this place where it's like sink or swim. Like because you feel like it was such a big leap, you give yourself more. You don't have any options. You know what I mean? You're like, I must swim. Like I gave up everything because I knew that this was the next step and this is where I needed to be. This must work.
And for me, like, was there a fear of failure? Of course. Like, of course I was afraid of not making it and not being good enough and being shitty. And I was terrified of putting it out there to be like, Danielle, I'm going to come work for you. And then in a year, like I'm like 5 years goes down the line and I'm still that girl who like never made it. That's scary when you like put your heart's desire out there and then you're like, but if I tell people and then I don't do it, am I the girl that failed? Am I the girl that like wasn't good enough?
But you gave yourself permission to have success. And I think that people get so scared about failing that they don't actually give themselves permission to succeed.
Well, and I knew, yes, I was afraid of that, but I was more afraid of truly like not trying and failing because I'd never tried.
Right.
And this is like everything about it pushed me out of my comfort zone, from taking photos to firing clients. That thought, like I still get sweaty thinking about like the first clients I had. And I fired them to their fucking face, by the way. Like there was no texting, like to their face. I was like, so this will actually be your last appointment with me? I'm not doing this service anymore. Like
sorry.
Terrifying. Like it was so scary and I lost friends because of it. I was kind of like ridiculed a little bit because of it because I was a fucking psycho taking photos and like I looked insane, but I knew that space and that time of either feeling stupid or not good enough or feeling alone.
Leave.
Yeah, it would only be for like this amount of time. It'd only be for a short period. And if I could make it past that really short, painful period, which I knew I would, like, and maybe it's because I was bullied really bad in school. And I'm like, maybe it's because like I was bullied and I made it out of there that I'm like, those painful parts don't last forever.
Right.
But you have to be strong enough. And I feel like really like truly like have faith in yourself and know like, okay, I'm not going to let myself sit here in this like dark place.
Right.
I'm going to do what I have to do to make it past.
There was times in my life where I remember feeling like, oh, why, like the world just hit me again. I keep getting knocked down. I keep getting knocked down. I keep getting knocked down. And then finally I remember like this moment where I'm like, you're letting this happen. Like you're choosing that this is your story. Like you're asking I kept like thinking like, when am I going to get a good break? When am I going to get a big break? You know what I mean? I'm letting the world happen to me instead of letting me happen to the world. And I was like, I remember literally thinking like the change starts with you. You create whatever the fuck you want. And I've had multiple moments in my life like that where I'm like, okay. And I have to just like tune out the noise and just jump into the unknown and trust myself that I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. And even if it's things where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't make a lot of money this week. And then the taxes come and they're like, now you owe money on your taxes. And then you're late on your car payment. I feel like people hear those things, whether you're an artist or not, it doesn't matter. Like any entrepreneur, business owner, or person in general understands this, where you're like, oh, I keep getting hit. But here's the deal. If you're not making the money you want because you don't have the clientele you want, that's because you're a shitty marketer.
Right.
If you owe money on your taxes because you didn't save money throughout the year to pay your taxes, that's because you're terrible with money and terrible with planning.
Right.
If all of a sudden you realize that you're behind on your car payment, it could be that you're also unorganized and you're not good at paying your bills and keeping track of these things. But it's so much easier to just like kind of like stick our head in a little hole and pretend like
it's not happening
like, and pretend then, like the bad things
right.
don't exist, but they do. But if you were to take, I feel like a little bit of time and invest that either into yourself or into your bills or into something that will give you a greater like prospect later.
Even this last week, one of my artists, we were talking to her, and I'm like, this thing that you think is really little is going to snowball, and all it's going to do is take you an afternoon to get all this cleaned up. Oh shit. I just knocked a bottle of water off. But I'm like, but we let these little things weigh on our shoulders for like 3 months, 6 months, like 9 months. And then all of a sudden it's like a year, and it just keeps compiling on itself. And it's like, you need an afternoon. You can't tell me you don't have an afternoon. Like, you need to sit down, get focused, and take care of your shit.
Well, and she admitted it. She's like, I love
know.
Netflix.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, I love Netflix.
Right.
I'm currently addicted to 2 shows right now. So like, I get it. I actually really like watching very strategic things, not just like general TV, but I still make sure like I can't have the fun if I haven't done the work.
And I don't like having things weighing on my shoulders. Like,
it never goes away.
I know. Like, I'm like, I literally can like, I tense up just like even thinking about having like things that I need to take care of. I'm like, oh, like it's just easier to get it done and get it off your plate.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And they don't always have to be these big, massive things. And always, even an example, my oldest Frenchie, my dog, he gets allergy shots. I've been giving him shots every day for like 6 months now.
Mm-hmm.
He's finally done. The past 6 weeks, he's been like really itchy to the point of like almost like drawing blood again. Like, it's been really bad. And I'm like, fuck, I gotta call the vet. And finally today I was like, why have you not just called the fucking vet?
Yeah, like,
I set an alarm on my phone.
Yeah.
I was in the car when it went off and I'm like, oh my God. And I had to call them. Like, literally, he's going to the vet today while I'm at work. I'm having my boyfriend take him so he can get these shots that he needs so we can just like calm down. Like, so many things, but I made the problem worse by pushing it off.
Right. And I think that sometimes you just have to prioritize what needs to get done, even if it seems like a small task, because a small little task can turn, like I said, it can turn into like, your dog can be really itchy.
Like, I know. But that's the thing. Like, even though that seems like a stupid example with him, he has such bad allergies. Like, he'll actually scratch himself to the point where he cuts skin and bleeds.
Aww.
That's why, like, it is a problem. And I take very good. So first off, no one come for me
you're
because
a bad mom dog.
He is the most spoiled little baby. He's currently wearing silk little PJs to make sure he doesn't scratch himself. So like, fuck off if you think I'm a bad dog mom. I'm a really good mom. But like, the point is, there's things that are going to be stressful, but you cannot push it off. Or even there might be times where you're like, I don't think I have the capacity to deal with this. I'm going to tell you that you do.
Yeah, it's not, once you get it done, you're like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. I'm so glad I just took care of that.
It's never that big of a deal.
Well, here's the other thing I want to ask you, Ani. So like, for you, when you take a big leap of faith, like talking about like moving here, like changing everything, were you surprised with like how like smooth everything rolled out? Like,
yeah.
Because I think that's like the biggest thing. Like, my husband and I, we just bought like another giant,
the White Castle.
We bought a White Castle. Where our last name is White. We call it the White Castle. Anyway, it's like a massive beach house. And I kept telling Garrett, I'm like, we're going to get that house and we're going to get that house. And everything rolled out so smoothly that I looked at it as like, hey, like, I mean, we were obviously, we were very logical in the purchase and everything. And we made sure it was something that wasn't going to be too stressful on our family. But even then I was like, everything, I'm like, so I always ask myself when things like that seem unachievable and not possible, and like, oh, that's 5, we literally were like, oh, when Ruby's in high school, maybe we'll buy that house. And I was like, no. And so for me, like, I like to entertain a possibility. I'm like, well, who would I have to become? Maybe I'm telling myself I'm not there yet, but maybe we are. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I always have this thing where I'm like, let's entertain the possibility. We entertained the possibility. We were able to make it happen, and everything about it was scary. It was a scary leap, but everything happened so smoothly. And to me, I look at it as like, okay, who am I supposed to become? Yeah. Like, literally, I'm like, there's a reason that everything that happened so smoothly, and now we're in this new home and new possibilities and new relationships. And I'm like, okay. And it was almost like I trusted myself, and Garrett trusted himself, and we were able to manifest this and make it happen. And I think that oftentimes, and people were like, what are the Whites doing? Oh my God, like they like in the last 5 years, like we've taken several leaps like this. And so people are like, what are they up to? And I think that oftentimes we sell ourselves short. Like, imagine if you stayed in Missouri and you got married and you're like, I should be happy with this man, but why am I not? I should be happy with my business. I bought my house, at 27.
It would have been a sense of longing for me.
Right? You would have been
almost like, but what? Like,
because you're not fulfilling your purpose. You'd almost be like bored. You'd be like, I hit every checkbox. And I think that oftentimes we tell ourselves not to reach for more and to be grateful for where we're at. And that can't be more than false. Like, I'm sorry, but like, when I get to this place where I'm like, oh, you should just settle in, and I'm like, no. And I think that that's one of the reasons, like, why my company's seen a lot of growth. Even the whole message of the Academy and BMS and all that is very growth oriented, because I'm always striving for more. I'm always like, because I trust myself, because I've taken so many leaps, it makes me be like, when you approach something that you're like, this looks fucking scary, I'm like, all right, Ani, like, let's put your hat on. We're both like sweating. And I'm like, because we know it's a big step. And we're like, this is scary. But because we've experienced so many times where we've trusted ourselves and decisions that we've made and we've seen, even if we have to course correct, we learn so fucking much.
Well, and not only that, I feel like people have the misconception of, if I want something more, it means I'm unhappy of where I'm at or I'm ungrateful. That's not what it is. You can, I always use myself as an example, but I love where I live. I moved into this really pretty house and my dogs have a backyard and that's literally all I wanted. I love where I live. I live in like an old person community, so it's really quiet, guys. It's super nice for me. But even inside of it,
you love that. You're like, nobody wants to talk to me. It's a retirement community.
I swear to God, I'm the youngest person. It has to be by 15 years. There's no way it's except for the one hippie guy. But like, I like that it's a really quiet neighborhood. And actually all the neighbors have been shocked at how young I am because most people my age just can't afford something like this. And even with that, I love where I live and I'm so happy. And the decorations, it's so cute. But let me tell you, did I spend about an hour this weekend on Zillow looking at houses closer to the beach? Yes, I did.
See? That's what I'm saying.
And it's not because I'm ungrateful, but it's like, okay, this is really great. I have my lease for a few more years. Now, where do I want to be in a few years? Because I'm not going to stay in this place once my lease is up. Not because I don't love it, because I know. So
you're kind of entertaining the possibility of the future.
Yeah, because I already know I'm not going to stay here forever. It's not my forever place.
Right.
So if I start looking now and I have 3 more years on my lease, in 3 years, where do I want to be? I'm going to be 34. I always want to be closer to the beach, but I'm never going to leave Dana Point. I'm going to be in this city. It has to be from here to here. And I literally just started looking at houses and looking at the pricing and what everything would cost. And then I'm like, okay, what do I have to do to make sure that I hit enough benchmarks, I have enough money saved, my credit's phenomenal, but like that I can afford. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it terrifying? Because guys, my house in Missouri was $200,000 and it was like 2,700 square feet. It was massive. $200,000 here will buy you a cardboard box 15 miles inland. It's millions here. Yeah. And even that for me is still mind-blowing. And I'm like, $5 million, $2 million. I'm like, oh my God. But then I'm like, oh, well, look how pretty that view is. And you just start seeing something bigger. And I love where I'm at now. But let me tell you, I'm going to love where I'm at even more in 5 years.
But I don't think that that's a problem. I think that I shouldn't keep saying people, but I think there's nothing wrong with having tangible goals.
Yes.
Because I believe that you grow as a human and as an individual, and that the tangible goals are results of your hard work and your growth.
Yes.
And so I think there's nothing wrong with wanting more in life and then saying, how do I make this happen for myself? Who do I need to become? And like, I think I talked about this on a couple other podcasts. I'm like, I think that we look at something like that and we think, oh, that's not achievable, right? But it's baby steps. Imagine like Ani in Missouri, if you were like, guess what? In like 5 years, you're going to have a $5 million home on the beach. Would you just like...
I'd be like, what the? No.
Yeah.
My car payment now is what my mortgage was in Missouri.
But that's what I'm saying. It's baby steps, though. It's baby steps. It's not even just baby steps of like you financially making more. It's baby steps of allowing yourself like, this is where I'm at. You know what I mean? Like, I remember like we've talked about this before, but like your first pair of designer shoes. And you were like, you were so cute. You moved to here and you were assisting me. And we were talking about shoes or something with one of my clients. And I was like, never. It was like an $800 pair of Christian Louis Vuitton, and you're like, I would never. And I was like, what's the most you've ever spent on something, Ani? And you go, well, I love books. And I was like, well,
I bought a $300 book.
Yeah, you told me that, and I was like, okay. I was like, that's cool. I guess you're really into books. And then I was like, don't worry. For me, I'm like, now I swear every team member I have, like when they buy their first pair of designer shoes, like to me, it's not about the designer shoes, but I'm like, it's like the mind shift that they have to allow themselves to purchase something so ridiculous as an $800 pair of shoes. Because I'm like, you fucking earned that. And it's like, again, it's not about the shoes. It's about the fact that they're like, yeah, I'm there. I want to buy these for myself.
And I think a lot of people would even hear this and they're like, I don't need tangible things. I just want to be like spiritually enlightened. That's cool. But okay, tell me right now, honestly, DM me on Instagram. What is the gauge of spirituality? How do you know you're enlightened? Like I had
this client one year, and this was actually like back when I lived in Arizona, and it was a smaller town, and I've always liked nice things, and I had like a Marc Jacobs bag. It wasn't even that fancy, but most people there like like, it was a smaller town. And I remember I had this client, and she was like an older woman in probably her like 50s. And she's like, and I think I bought a Marc Jacobs, and then I had like also had like another, like a Chloe I brought in. And she started like noticing my bags. And instead of being like, that's so cute, like, I'm so great, glad you're doing so good, she was like, oh, I don't like to waste my money on things like that. I'd prefer to put my money on traveling. And I was like, oh no, I like doing both. I like traveling, and I also like to buy myself. I didn't say that, but I was like, why would you say that to me? I was like,
so rude.
I know, but I was like, that's cool. Everybody values something different. I like bags, I guess. But
do you know what happened to me once in one of our classes? I was wearing a pair of Chloe's, and they're $1,500 booties. I have them in 2 colors, and a student was like, oh my God, I love your shoes. Where are they from? And I'm like, oh, they're Chloe. And she's like, I don't know what that means. And I was like, oh, just like Google it. Not a big deal. She came back the next day, and she goes, those shoes are $1,500. I go, yeah. She goes, I would never. I go, I did.
But that's what I'm saying. It's not like, I remember when you were assisting me and you're like, oh, I would never. And I was like, we'll see. But it's a perspective change. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's just like, okay. Like, and that's how it is. Like, you have to take baby steps. You can't go from buying like, $50 shoes to $1,500 shoes.
Well, and I think it's when you're taking little steps, what seemed impossible becomes possible. And once that possibility is open, like it changes the way you look at things. Now, am I still selectively a cheap bitch about something?
Same.
Yes, I am.
Same.
Yes. And it's not because I don't have the money, but it's where I choose to put my money. There are still some things that I'm like, what the? I was sending you a pair of shoes last night. I'm like, what the fuck is this? That's crazy.
It's like $3,000 shoes. I'm like, I draw the line there. Like, no.
I'm like, that is, what the fuck? What? But even inside of that, guys, you just have to realize that wanting more doesn't mean you're ungrateful.
Right.
And looking at the more.
And it doesn't make you a money-hungry bitch. Like,
it doesn't make you entitled. Yeah. It doesn't make you a rich bitch. It doesn't make you, we hear that all the time.
And the thing is, I would have you consider like staying safe and being like, I'm grateful with where I'm at. There's nothing wrong with saying you're grateful, but also wanting to achieve more, because I always have to ask myself too. I'm like, if I become a better mom, if I become a better business owner, if I become a better wife, like, who knows how many people this is going to have an impact on. By staying safe and by staying with where I'm at and never taking that leap of faith, I'm only going to impact the current people that are in my current circle of influence. So it's not even necessarily about you. And I think that life is so much more fulfilling knowing that you're making an impact, knowing that you're making a difference with, even if it's just a small difference with inside of your community. You know what I mean? And it gives you purpose, it gives you passion, and it helps you live a more happy, fulfilled life in doing so.
And I think that's the thing, is essentially having a more fulfilled life for you. Because even the happiest person in the world, there is always something that they either want for themselves or want to do for someone else. There's always something that would give them more peace or more happiness, or like spark something inside of them that brings them joy.
Right.
But so often I feel like we're so ingrained of like, just be happy where you are. There are starving children in this place. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't mean like I have to eat all of this just because someone else is unhappy. Like, I hate that kind of mentality of like, well, someone has it worse, so you don't have a right to complain. People's pain cannot be compared.
Right.
Just because someone else had it worse does not mean that your pain is any less to you.
Right.
And that's why I hate that game of comparison and people being like, you should just be grateful. You're so this, that. Well, fuck you. Like, you don't know how I feel on the inside. You don't know what this is doing to me mentally, emotionally. And that stuff then comes out physically as well.
Right.
That like, just because someone had it worse doesn't mean it's less for you.
It's interesting that you bring that point up. I remember like when Garrett and I were literally like losing everything, and I was driving a Range Rover at the time, and I remember like I would share my story, and I remember actually kind of recently my sister looked at me and she was like, "You act like you had it so bad," and I was like, I'm like, no. I had to give back my Range Rover. We weren't paying the payments. I'm like, we weren't paying the payments on our home. We didn't even have any credit cards because we had tapped those out. I'm like, I literally was just trying to pay the few bills to keep the fucking lights on and eat. I'm like, so although you think it wasn't that bad, I'm like, you have no idea the internal struggle that was going on just to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
I'm like, and it's not like there was literally nothing I could do. So it might have, and I was pretty vocal about it at the time, but nobody like that's when
it's like they didn't take it seriously.
Yeah, and I was like, I get it. You don't see with where I'm at. And then all of a sudden, like we moved to a home in Arizona that was like half the price, and we barely got approved for it. We didn't buy it. We could barely rent it, and it was like just enough to where we knew we could make the rent. And then I ended up giving back my Range Rover because I didn't have a choice. I had to co-sign with my mom on a used Audi. An Audi's a nice car, but I went from a Range Rover to like an old used Audi that I had to co-sign with my mom, right? And I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, you don't know and at the time my husband had cheated on me. I'm like, and I wasn't super vocal with that at the time. And I'm like, you have no idea what the struggles that I went through. So although you might like see me from a different light, like I knew what I was going through, and I knew like it was a very painful space to be in. And I had no other choice but to like literally create a different situation, a different environment, take multiple leaps of faith, like just trust that like I needed to do something different. And I think it was like I waited. It's like all these little things I saw that were happening, and I was that person that's like, no, it's not happening. It's not happening. Just keep racking up the credit cards. Keep racking. No, it's fine. The market's going to turn around. The market's going to turn around. And it didn't. And so now I'm very conscious about like when I see red flags, whether it's in my relationship, in my business, like little things like that I'm like, take care of it now. Like now.
And I feel like you and I are the same in that way, where we see it and we're willing to give something a chance, whether it's a person, like whatever it is. Like it's always like, there's a chance, but where it's like Hawkeyes, like if it doesn't change, we're I feel like not like quick start, but like quick to take action and decision to be like, this doesn't work anymore.
But we've worked together for a while now, and we even like trust our instincts. We're like, hey, how do you feel about this person, or how do you feel about this? And I'm like, is it just me? And we're like, nope. And then now we're like, we have this ability to we're like, okay, let's trust our instincts. Let's go. And every time we do that, I'm like, that feels right.
And that's something I really love between you and I. And bear in mind, guys, we've been working together now for, almost like 3.5 years now, but you've known me
10.5 years.
It's been 75 years. But we've been working, literally side by side every day for years. And something that I really like that has grown from that is the fact that I'll be like, Danielle, it doesn't like I don't have a reason to say no to this or this person.
My gut is telling me.
But it doesn't. Yeah. I've literally told you, it doesn't feel good. And you've been like, okay, well then you know what? Let's go this way. And you've done it to me where you're like, on paper, it looks right. And it sounds right. But
my
stomach is hurting. Something's churning. And we're like, fuck it then. Let's just not do it.
And you know what? The times that we don't act quick enough, it keeps coming back. It's like the little thorn that just like keeps like, and we're like, but it looks so good on paper. Like we got to leave it. It's fine. And then it like blooms into a bigger problem. And so I would challenge you guys, if you're listening to this podcast, where are, areas in your life that you keep feeling like, hey, number one, you need to tackle this project because it's going to just keep getting bigger. Or number two, you need to take this leap of faith. You need to cross this path. You need to entertain this idea and see if it's even a possibility for you. So just learn to trust yourself and then see what happens and take that leap of faith, because on the other side of that is a life that you will experience that you will not by just playing it safe and pushing those feelings away.
So guys, thank you for being here with us for the Big Money Stylist podcast. We are very excited to announce.
Oh yeah.
Would you like to announce it?
No, yes. Okay, so by now, if you guys are listening to this, it's the challenge, right?
Yes.
So I've been announcing this. I just hit my head on the microphone. I've been announcing like we have this like really cool thing for education coming up. So we're calling it the Big Money Stylist Challenge. It's a virtual event. It's 3 days. And it's open to any artists that have been interested in learning the business, marketing, and sales, which is kind of something that we've kind of kept secret.
Yeah. So it is a virtual class, 3 days long, 2 hours a day. And inside of this, it's really us going through and essentially figuring out like not only where you're at in your business, but where you want to go and the steps to actually get there. This isn't like a fucking mood board thing. I hate those things. But it's really going through and planning and not only talking, it's with myself and Danielle and talking to other artists, but really making a legitimate plan for your business and seeing where the pitfalls are, the things that need to change, and what you need to do specifically for your business.
It's like taking the time that you should like every quarter, but you don't actually do. And now we're like, hey, let us help you, hold you accountable for the facts of where you're at so that you can make big decisions that you need to make. So we have had a ton of people ask us about this. We're finally putting together a virtual event. Again, it's 3 days. It's going to be I'm excited for it, actually.
I'm super jazzed about
I think it'll be cool. So where do they go for this?
If you want information, go to nbr.education and you can read all about it there and sign up. It's going to be March 19th.
Okay. And make sure
21st.
you're on our email list. We were kind of cleaning up a lot of our email list, and we've had past students that have like been like, "Oh, you didn't announce it on social media." We always announce to our email list. So if for some reason you have an old email or whatever it is, enter your new email again, because we always advertise to our email list first, and then kind of go to social media. And a lot of times we don't even go to social media because stuff sells out before we even do. So again, go to nbr.education. Make sure you fill out your information or put your email in so you guys can get updates on future education in future education in the future.
So thanks guys for being here with us, and we'll see you next week.